There's a joke that, amongst others, there's a joke that Woody Allen tells about his childhood. He said he was a very mischievous child who was always giving his mother a run for her money. So he said that his mother would often tell him that if a strange man ever pulled up in a car and rolled down the windows and invited him to get in so he could take him for a ride and offered him candy, she said, "Whatever you do, go, please go." Right? We've all had our moments, I'm sure. However, it's a joke, of course, but when this happens in real life, right? When a child is exploited, or somebody who's elderly is exploited, or, we see in the news, right? So many of those stories of this hoax and this scam and people who are exploited, or even during those moments in our own lives when we realize that we've been taken for a ride, is not so funny, is it? It's not funny. It's not pleasant. It's not good to be exploited. And I'll tell you who felt similarly was Jesus. And we're given a very clear picture of that in this gospel account that we hear today. It's probably the single most obvious moment in the Gospels when we see that Jesus gets really upset, right? When he cleanses the temple. Why does he get so upset? Because the exploitation is ridiculous. What's going on there is ridiculous. Those merchants that were there, they were preventing people from being able to access God as they were entitled to, of being able to worship, of being able to receive from God what they needed. And, what happened was this, every Jew had to once a year go to Jerusalem and offer sacrifice there in the temple. So what would consequently happen was that many of them had to travel great distances, and they didn't bring their object of sacrifice with them because it was impractical to do so. It was very burdensome to bring whatever animal you could with you. And so what they were doing was they had to buy them there in the temple. And they were ripping people off. They were charging exorbitant prices to sell them whatever object of sacrifice they had to render. They clearly weren't going to go back home without completing the purpose of their mission. Sometimes, even when they brought their own little animal or whatever it was that they had to offer, a lot of those people, they would be checked for authenticity, or if they were actually fit for sacrifice, and they would typically render them to be too defective to be worthy of being offered to God. And then they would sell them the worthy ones, the ones who were more robust. And of course, they were sold a bill of goods, and they were really, really ripped off. We get this gospel today, we receive this gospel today because the season of Lent, this is part of the purpose of the season of Lent. The season of Lent wants us to try to identify the ways in which perhaps we are being exploited, and it's very subtle what often happens in our life. The season of Lent wishes to cleanse our lives from disordered affections, disordered attention that we give to particular realities, and attention and affections that keep us from worshiping God, or from giving time to God to be able to receive the life and the direction that God wants for us. Now, listen, this happens in all our lives in very subtle ways, and We all get exploited in very unique ways. But let me just give you just a few examples of amongst many others. Many of the things that we sometimes get exploited by are actually realities that are not bad in and of themselves. I'll give you one of them. It's good to be aware of what is happening in the news. We should be aware of what is happening in the news so we don't live in la-la land. But it's not good to become obsessed with the news, because we have to understand how the news industry works. Regardless of what our inclinations are, regardless of our political views and longings, the purpose of the news media is to make us upset. Because if we're upset, right, we are engaged and we keep coming back for more and more. And if we are engaged, they're making money. And whether it's cable news or you're reading articles or whatever, it's good to be attentive to these realities, but it's not good to be consumed by these realities. A lot of times we're far more in tune with whatever the news is telling us than whatever news God wants to bring to us. I'll give you another example. Boy, this one is very widespread. It's good. You know, there are some positive aspects to social media, but it's not good to be consumed by social media. You know, I would say that in general, as a society, we're addicted to it. And, you know, the time and energy and perspectives that it draws us to are quite often so disconnected from reality. You know, I often kind of laugh when I hear that, you know, sometimes we'll roll out, you know, events to participate in here in the parish or, you know, school families and whatnot. And, you know, people will say, yeah, I couldn't make it because I just have no time. I have no time in my life. But boy, oh boy, people have time. The amount of time they spend on chats, the amount of time they spend on Instagram, etc. Listen, not all of that is bad. Again, it's okay to be on social media, but it's not okay, it's not good to become consumed by social media. I always tell people, whatever you see on social media, whatever people publish, whatever they put on those chats, take it with a grain of salt, because most of the time, what they're putting out there is what they think that other people want to hear, so they can get likes. It's all about getting likes. You know, listen, the greatest like we need to get is the like from God, who loves us regardless, but God wants to help us. And a lot of times, whatever time we have to interact with God is left to like nothing. Is left to, we barely give God, you know, the scraps off our table. Another thing, I could mention many. And again, mind you, these are all good things. It's our disordered relationship with them. Listen, I grew up, I've been around here for a few years now, so you know where I'm at, and you know what things I enjoy and what things I cherish, and sports is one of them. I grew up not only a sports fan, but also playing sports. You know, every now and then, every time I listen to, whether it's school confessions or CCD confessions, kids, you know, they confess what they do. I always ask them, are you saying your prayers, right? Make sure they're on the right track. And, you know, they'll answer. And then I ask them, I said, are you going to Mass? Some of them say yes, probably the ones that are here, you know, say yes. And there are others that say sometimes, or they say, no, we don't go to Mass. And I'll say, well, what's happening? How come you're not going to Mass? They'll say, No, because I have tournaments on the weekend. I have this sport or that sport. And I tell them, it's good. It's wonderful that you play the sport because sports are good. They're healthy. They teach you a lot. I said, but you can find time. You can find time for the sport and find time for God. And of course, they say, yeah, but we have to travel to, I don't know, Orlando or Tampa or Timbuktu. And I'm thinking, man, times have changed, And listen, the reason that this has become, is it good to practice a sport? There's no better thing for a kid to do than to be involved in something like that. It's good, it's wholesome. It's not good to have our lives completely consumed by it, to the point that it keeps the children from coming to worship God, right? From coming to receive for them and for the family what God needs to give them. And by the way, the people that organize all that stuff, the reason it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, it's a big industry. Big industry. People are getting exploited by it, Listen, I could mention a million things, and we all have our own. I got to keep myself in check to make sure that some things that I'm really passionate about, I don't get consumed by. And they're, by and large, healthy, good. May the season of Lent help us to reflect on that reality. How are we being exploited presently in our lives? What do we have to do, right, to correct some of that and order our relationship with those realities? So, if a stranger comes to you and pulls up and rolls down the window and offers to take you for a ride and promises to give you candy and asks you to go along, whatever you do, don't go. Don't go, because you're about to be exploited. And if they decide to park themselves in your life, it's very simple. Just call Jesus and ask him to drive them away. My dear friends, let us now stand and